At the same time Nolan Bushnell was getting his arcade business off the ground, Ralph Baer's brown box prototype was being adapted into the world's first home video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey. Baer had figured out how to put a few movable shapes on screen, but how do you turn that into a game? The brown box came with a variety of programmable modes, mostly based off things like checkers and volleyball. Baer, by his own admission, is no game designer, and the brown box's offerings were mostly intended to give potential investors an idea of what the technology might do. He did think the tennis game was pretty good, however. After securing the rights to the brown box from Sanders Associates, Magnavox got to work on the Odyssey. Nothing even remotely like it had existed before, and understandably the company was somewhat at a loss about what to do with it. Baer felt it would be in their best interest to keep things simple. The tennis game was pretty good, so focus on that. He advised Magnavox to keep costs low, suggesting they retail the Odyssey for no more than $20, or about $140 in today's money. Magnavox took Baer's advice and proceeded to completely ignore it. James Rolfe made an excellent and comprehensive review of the Magnavox Odyssey in 2009. Please see the link in the description. If you don't mind a little scatological humor, I highly recommend it. Faced with a completely novel product, Magnavox sought ways to make the Odyssey approachable to a mainstream audience. The term video game didn't exist yet, so Magnavox marketed the Odyssey as a total play and learning experience for all ages. Odyssey is an electronic game simulator that easily attaches to any television. With Odyssey, you participate in television. You're not just a spectator. Odyssey is thought, action, and reaction. It is an electronic teaching aid, too. It can help your child learn numbers, letters, geography, even abstract thinking. So the Odyssey is described in its manual. Computer Space had shown that being too innovative could be off-putting, so Magnavox marketed the Odyssey's games as electronic adaptations of familiar pastimes. Ralph Baer's tennis game did make it to the Odyssey's initial roster, described in the manual as the basic Odyssey game that develops your electronic coordination. Once players got the hang of it, they would presumably move on to the more advanced tennis game, described in the manual as offering all the excitement of Wimbledon, complete with a comprehensive set of tournament rules. Players first had to rally to determine who would serve first, and the rally was only valid if it crossed the net at least 3 times. Once the server was determined, they had to position themselves behind their baseline and serve diagonally into the opposing player's service box. Most of the Odyssey's games were like this. The complicated rules of competitive sports were applied more or less unchanged to the Odyssey's electronic approximations, with little consideration of how those rules might be difficult to follow in such a new format. The hockey game, for instance, was fast-paced and intense, but required players to keep careful track of whether or not the puck was offsides. The skiing game was basically a race through a maze, but the opposing player had to keep time and assess a 2 or 3 second penalty every time the player hit an obstacle. Perhaps the worst offender was the football game, which in addition to the Odyssey itself, required the use of a game board, a yardage marker, a football marker, a scoreboard, 60 flashcards, 6 pages of instructions, 2 different game settings depending on whether the play was a pass or a run, and dice to determine the win factor during kickoffs. Essential to most of these experiences were vinyl overlays placed over the TV screen during play. Vinyl overlays were pretty common with early arcade games, as they could provide atmosphere to the basic and usually monochrome graphics on hand. Usually these overlays simply enhanced gameplay. With the Odyssey, they were absolutely essential. Several games had barely anything to do with the Odyssey at all. The roulette game, which was featured prominently in marketing, came with poker chips and fake money, but the only gameplay element that used the Odyssey was the spin, wherein a player would close their eyes and move the cursor all over the screen to determine where the ball landed on the wheel. The Odyssey also came with 2 educational experiences. States, in which one player called out a state and the other moved the cursor to it, and Simon Says, which was the exact same thing but with body parts. Upon seeing what Magnavox had done with his technology, Ralph Baer was mortified. I saw the box and out comes 10,000 playing cards, paper money, and all this crap. I just knew nobody's ever going to use this stuff. Worse still, The Odyssey retailed not for $20, as Baer had suggested, but $100, the modern equivalent of nearly $700. Despite its high price tag, the Odyssey sold a decent number of units. Prototypes of the game were put on display in May of 1972, and it was available for purchase in September of that year. Initially, it was only sold at licensed Magnavox dealers, and there was some confusion among consumers about whether or not it would work on non-Magnavox televisions. Some dealers lied that it wouldn't in order to boost TV sales. Magnavox marketed the system quite extensively, in both print ads and television commercials. They also marketed it overseas, in places as diverse as Venezuela and the Soviet Union. The original Odyssey was discontinued in 1975, and during its run it sold a worldwide total of about 350,000 units. The Odyssey was expensive, and from a modern perspective, not very well designed. But like Computer Space, it was new and futuristic, and cool. Middle-class families who wished to flex a little by owning the latest and greatest technology were its main purchasers, and the system's educational elements made it appealing to parents. For many Americans in the early 1970s, owning a Magnavox Odyssey was something of a status symbol. It was while playing the Odyssey's tennis game at a local Magnavox dealer that Nolan Bushnell came up with the idea for his next game.